Hello, my name is Kelly and I'm presenting my research paper on comprehensive treatment models, specifically in discrete trial training and early intense behavior intervention. The purpose of this research is to explore the best strategies for teaching through discrete trial training for students diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Discrete trial training is defined as a way to teach new skills using planned steps. There is evidence to support that students benefit from the use of discrete trial training, and discrete trial training falls under the category of comprehensive treatment models. This research will focus on the definition of discrete trial training, implementing discrete trial training with fidelity, the best strategies for teaching through discrete trial training, response error correction using discrete trial training, reinforcement, motivation, and comprehensive treatment models for students with autism spectrum disorder. All right, comprehensive treatment models are defined as intervention as an approach that consists of a set of practices designed to achieve a broader learning of development impact on the core deficit of ASD. Discrete trial training are skills that are taught through different trials, and these skills include labeling and requesting objects, asking questions, initiating and maintaining conversation, describing items, and making social greetings. Many students benefit from discrete trial training, and discrete trial training is also classified as an evidence-based practice. So the significance of the problem here, so the students that are currently working on these skills often need it to be broken down into smaller steps, and discrete trial training is a very planned organization of the steps to learning new skills. There's evidence to support that when evidence-based practices are delivered poorly, the outcome will likely be unfavorable, and the students will also see limited progress on their objectives, their goals. You'll often see maladaptive behaviors and increased dependence on others. There's a level of treatment integrity that needs to be considered when implementing discrete trial training. Oftentimes, we're finding that there's educators and school personnel who are not properly trained in discrete trial training. The evidence to support the use of comprehensive treatment models, such as discrete trial training, the majority of comprehensive treatment models are based around applied behavioral analysis. Students have varying needs and are learning at different paces, and the systematic approaches taken can help plan for their instruction. Choosing the right approach and treatment model can be a challenge for educators. Many students with ASD have different deficits and need different approaches for intervention. Research states that discrete trial training can be used to help teach skills such as labeling, requesting objects, asking questions, initiating and maintaining conversation, as well as behavior management. And that's stated through Boo Taught. And this author also agrees that there can be limitations when generalizing the pre-taught skills into natural environments. According to Eisenhower, discrete trial training can teach students with ASD new behaviors and new discriminations among stimuli. There are also error correction procedures that need to be followed in order to properly implement discrete trial training. The article argues that an active student response after an error does not always support the students with ASD. There are different levels of prompting used in discrete trial training, and the different levels can be that you either fade it, so you start with a lot of prompting and you go to just a little prompting needed, or you start with the least restrictive, where you start with no prompting and then add the prompting in as is needed for the students. We're going to look at early intensive behavior intervention, and this is used to help younger students with ASD. And instead of focusing on like one singular behavior, you're going to be looking at multiple stimulus behaviors at the same time and looking to modify those behaviors. The early interventions support students on ASD. From the article Matson and Jang, you can see that the different intense strategies really help the students to be successful. There's different types of reinforcement which students use during discrete trial training. Usually the reinforcement can be a favorite object, a favorite food, or a favorite activity that they get to do, something kind of special. It gives the students a reason to be doing the work. The type of reinforcement the student receives when engaged in discrete trial training can have an impact on their success, according to Rispoli and al. They argue that students having access to non-contingent reinforcements, meaning that they have to do nothing and they still get the thing that they want, can have positive impacts on their learning, and it can actually help to eliminate behaviors that can be challenging at times. This could also help to reduce escape-minded behaviors, and also increase compliance for students with disabilities. There are many different ways that students can be motivated when performing discrete trial training, according to Elliott and Dillenberger. Identification and selection of effective reinforcements are important prerequisites, so it's important to know what your students like and what your students will work for. They also state when students have a choice in the task and activity, they will engage in more on-task behaviors. The study found that offering students a choice in what they are learning can have a positive effects on self-determination as well. So when you give the students the power over what they're learning, they tend to be more engaged. When educators are performing discrete trial training, there are error correction strategies that need to be followed, and these can also increase student success. In a study performed by Turin and al., 2 error correction strategies were tested for effectiveness. These included independent probe as well as delay. These strategies were tested on students with autism spectrum disorder, and it found that there was greater success rate and quicker acquisition of tasks with the independent probe correction strategy. The argument that the author makes here is that different students respond to different reinforcement, different correction strategies. It really depends on the student that you're working with as to what they're going to be working for or what kind of correction suits their needs. The pace at which educators manipulate the antecedent variables as well as the rate of reinforcement can have an impact on student performance. Roberb and Carbon argue that the ultimate success of educational programs for many students with autism may be at least partially dependent on teacher manipulation of instructional variables, leading to improved learner attention and teacher-directed activities. So teachers have a huge impact on the skills that their students can learn just based upon the rate in which they are giving instruction. This article states that these intervals, defined as the duration of time between a consequence and a delivery of the next instructional stimuli or demand. So what they're saying in this article is if you shorten that time between the student response and the next demand, you'll see greater results. You'll see a decrease of self-stimulating behaviors as well as, a faster rate of that instructional delivery. And this also impacts the student because they can be gaining more reinforcement, therefore leading to more tasks and activities being able to be completed. A big part of this research was stating how educators and school personnel need to be properly trained when implementing discrete trial training with fidelity. According to Mason and al., when these comprehensive treatment models are not delivered properly, they can have short and long-term effects on our students. Jenkins and al. States that educators do not always implement the instructional procedures accurately and consistently. They argue that these errors in implementation have, again, these impacts on students, and the information presented in this article includes treatment integrity, the errors in implementation, discrete trial training, and the effects of the integrity. It shows that the students are not obtaining skills, they're not meeting their goals, and it's not necessarily due to the student's capability, it's due to the delivery of the instruction. There are many positive impacts that are seen in students with ASD as a result of the comprehensive treatment model of early intensive behavioral intervention. Smith et al. States that students may have more progress in some areas as a result of early intensive behavioral intervention. And again, before administering this comprehensive treatment model, staff must attend trainings on discrete trial training, and they need to be very knowledgeable about what they're doing. They need to be aware of the impact that they can have on students. Young et al. States that intensive behavior interventions are perhaps the most promising in prompting improved long-term outcomes. The author also claims that discrete trial training can have positive impacts on language, social and academic skills, as well as challenging behaviors. This is also the section where they state that having peers facilitate discrete trial training can have positive impacts on students diagnosed with ASD. It states that students not only are able to work with their peers, they are able to generalize skills, and they are also able to see tasks being modeled by their peers. So it's more of a, accurate representation of what they're supposed to be doing. The implications of this research, there's opportunities for educators to improve their fidelity when implementing intense behavior modification programs, such as discrete trial training. Staff should be properly trained before implementing these practices. There's positive impacts seen with discrete trial training, especially when gaining foundational skills and targeting challenging behaviors. And there's also evidence that the peer-facilitated discrete trial training can have positive impacts on students. So in conclusion, there's positive short and long-term impacts for students who receive comprehensive treatment models, such as discrete trial training and early intensive behavioral interventions. And the biggest thing that I gained through this research is that I find it really beneficial for students to be able to learn from their peers, and I think that supporting them through having peers facilitate modeling for discrete trials, or even assisting in the reinforcing and the overall success of the students can be very important. I think that encouraging those peer interactions and helping with those pre-taught skills can be really beneficial for our students with autism spectrum disorder. Thank you for listening.